So welcome everyone to the May 2017 Presidents and Leaders Roundtable meeting. My name is the Reverend David Pyle. I am the Governance Program Manager for the Central East region, among other roles. We'll introduce the other staff members that are currently on the call, and I know at least one other is saying that they will come in at about 8 o'clock, 8:15. But it's good to have you all with us. And as you know, Unitarian Universalists tend to come a little bit late sometimes. So we usually have more people join us as we go on. So as we begin, I'm going to begin us with a little reading. And our opening words and virtual chalice lighting come from, as some people know, I like to pick readings from the hymnal because I think that there are many times we miss some of the treasures that are there. And so I begin us with this one. It is number 646, the larger circle. We clasp the hands of those that go before us, and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers, whose hands are joined in dance. And the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it, except in fragments. Wendell Berry. And so with that, welcome once again to the 2013 May Presidents and Leaders Roundtable meeting. The purpose of this call, the purpose of this time together that we have each month, is to offer regularly scheduled opportunity for congregational leaders to connect with UUA Central East Regional staff. And we have multiple staff members on this call today. We'll introduce them in a few minutes. It's to share a few good ideas monthly with all congregational presidents and leadership. And one of the things that we know is that a large number of people actually do look at the video each month. And we know that one from the numbers on YouTube, but also because they then send me emails and questions and follow up. So just so you know that this is a resource that we create not just for those that are here at the moment, but for people that might connect afterwards. To build community between the leaders of the congregations of the Central East region of the UUA. We want you all to start getting to know each other, to recognizing each other's names, faces, and voices. And so this is one of the strategies that we have for helping you all begin to connect. I think sometimes we often don't realize that other Unitarian Universalists exist in other Unitarian Universalist congregations. And so we're looking for ways to be able to help bridge that mental gap. And for the regional staff to hear directly from congregations what's important to you, and to aid in us developing programming and capacity building training, us being able to serve you all better. So that's the purpose of this call. It doesn't. We talk about the same purpose every month. If there are things that this conference call could be doing besides this, we'd love for you all to tell us that. I am easy to find, as is every UUA staff member. It's first initial and last name at UUA.org. So DPYLE at UUA.org. So our agenda for the call today, to talk about the chalice lighting and the purpose of the call, which we've just done. We'll introduce our featured UUA staff members, who are Beth Casebolt and Patricia Infante. And I also see Andrea Lerner on the call at the moment, so we'll also introduce Andrea. And our regional lead, the Reverend Megan Foley, will be joining us about 8:15 when she's able to get off of another meeting that's currently ongoing. We'll do a little bit less than usual. We're at the end of the church year, so we'll do a little bit about upcoming events in the CER calendar. We'll talk a little bit about General Assembly, and then we've got 2 program presentations today. So remember, we're still trying some new things. So this one we're bringing you 2, but they go together. Beth Casebolt, our communications consultant for the region, will be bringing programming on social media and communications in congregations. And we'll have that presentation, and then there'll be a time for questions. And then after that, Patricia Infante, who among her many roles is the Safe Congregations program manager for the region. We'll talk about healthy disclosure, about how to how we share in an appropriate way as leaders in our congregations. Then I want to, with the time we have left, have you all have some conversation around how does your congregation communicate? with each other and the world? Is there something unique that you do that would be great if other congregations knew about? Is there a challenge that you have around communication that you'd like to raise up? So it's really just a time for conversation. And then we'll have some closing words. Does that sound like an okay plan for our time together? All right. So I want to thank you all for making the time each month. When, we're coming to the end, we got one more of these in this church year, and that'll be next month, talking about what occurred at General Assembly, and I'll be the presenter for that. So I will have 2 days post General Assembly to come up with a narrative for what occurred at General Assembly. So some thoughts and prayers my way in those 2 days would be useful. But a year ago, this was a dream that Pat Infante and I and Megan Foley had. And so thank you all for coming. I just wanted to say that. Thank you all for coming and being a part of this every month. I hope it's useful to you. And we'd love to hear more about how it could be more useful as we go on. So, introducing our CER Congregational Life staff. So I'll show you the pictures. There's my little origami bird that flies away of Pat Infante and Beth Casebolt. And then I'm going to take us off screen share for a few minutes. And I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves a little bit. So Beth, would you like to introduce yourself? And I see you are introducing someone else as well.
Yes, he just decided it's time for breakfast. My name is Beth Casebolt. I'm the Central East Region Communications Consultant. I'm also the Operations Manager for the region. And I am in Ohio. I live in St. Clairs, Ohio, which is just across the border from Wheeling, West Virginia. And I manage all of the social media, websites, calendars, newsletters for the region as part of my communications role. So that's me.
And you also manage our administrative staff.
That's true. I do. I do manage the administrative staff. That's the operations manager side of things.
Right.
So
and right now she's managing her brand new grandson.
Yes. Who she has gone to South Korea to be with. So thank you, Beth. If you couldn't tell, in many ways, Beth is the one that kind of manages the rest of us a bit. Between Beth and Christina Sanchez, they kind of help coordinate all of that we do as regional staff. So thank you, Beth. Patricia Infante,
hello.
Would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. So I am part of the regional staff. I have been around for 11 years. I was originally part of the Joseph Priestley District staff, and I've moved along with all of the organizational changes. I am the primary contact for the Philadelphia cluster and for congregations in central and southern New Jersey and in Manhattan. I also live in New Jersey. I'm outside of Philadelphia. My home congregation is Cherry Hill, and I see Lisa Winkler's online. Hi, Lisa. I do program management for the region in areas of faith development. So I'm the person who takes care of a lot of L trainings and Renaissance modules. I'm also working in the area of stewardship for the congregation. I am part of the Safe Congregations team at the UUA staff. And our members, there's one member from each one of the regions, and we meet regularly to discuss safe congregations concerns. And I'm also working with David and some other folks on the special things that are important to larger congregations. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Pat. We'll hear from Beth and Pat more in a few minutes. I see Andrea's with us. Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself?
What was that?
So remember, if you are online on a phone, you could hit *6 or your phone's mute feature.
All right, I'm Andrea Lerner, also one of the Central East Region UUA staff, and my congregations are in north of New York City and a couple in New York City and also in northern New Jersey. And I live in eastern Pennsylvania, and my program areas are the Annual Program Fund, Chalice Lighters, and Ministerial Transitions. And I just wanted to come and say hi. And I don't think I can be with you the whole time, but thank you all for investing your evening.
And thank you, Andrea. And as I said, Megan Foley will be with us in a few minutes. I'll just do my piece. I try and do it every other meeting or so. So I'm David Pyle. I'm also a member of the regional staff. I serve as the primary contact for the congregations of the Baltimore cluster, the Central Pennsylvania cluster, and the Delmarva Peninsula cluster, which is kind of Delaware and the eastern shore of Maryland. I am also the governance consultant for the region, help with congregations on things like boards and bylaws and committees and structure. I help Renee Rahutsky with the leadership development curriculum and programs, and I work with Pat on the large church program, and I also manage the region's adjunct consultant program, which you'll hear more about later, not today. So that's kind of who we are. But what I wanted to do is go through and see who you are real fast. Now, it would take forever to run through and ask people a whole bunch of questions for everybody to introduce themselves by congregation. So what we usually do is do a state roll call. So if you've muted yourself, unmute yourself as you can. And when we call out your state, if you could like shout out a little bit. And we always see who's here and who's not. So Virginia, anyone here from Virginia? No. That's like 2 months in a row. Maryland.
Yay!
Yay! Maryland always has a good contingent. Washington, D.C. Nobody from D.C. today. Delaware.
Yay!
One person from Delaware. Linda, bless you. Pennsylvania.
There's me.
Well, there is Andrea, and I should have shouted out from Delaware. New Jersey.
Yay!
Hi there, it's Lisa Winkler.
Hello, Lisa. New York. Got a few from New York. Ohio.
Yo.
Yo. Is that George, right?
Yes.
Yes. Connecticut. No one from Connecticut. We do have a couple of congregations in Connecticut, I think, still. West Virginia.
Yes,
I'm here.
Yes. See, how great is that? So you also get to see, what the region entails in doing that. So thank you all. I'm going to share screen again and bring back up our slides to talk about our upcoming events. Now, like I said, we're at the end of the congregational year. I really didn't want to pull a bunch of upcoming events this time. There are some being populated for the fall for trainings, and you can always go to the website, UUA.org/events, and if you go there, it will look like, hang on a second, it'll look like that if you go there. So I'm not going to, previous months I've walked you all through parts of the website. I'm not planning to do that today. But what I do want to do is talk a little bit about one event that is upcoming in a couple of weeks. And that's a webinar that I highly recommend people think about attending. Even if you're not going to General Assembly this year, this webinar would probably be a useful thing to do. It's our GA orientation webinar. It's Tuesday, June 13th from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's just a focus, just kind of a general introduction to attending General Assembly, either in person or virtually. And how themes, topics, delegate information. It's going to take apart some of that great big book that goes out and help you all better understand the specific details of this year's General Assembly. This year's General Assembly is probably going to be a fairly critical one. In a lot of ways, not just because of the presidential election, but also just because, there's a lot of transitions happening in the UUA, and we're going to New Orleans for a justice-centered, if not a justice GA, then one that we're focusing on some of the justice issues related to New Orleans. And so even if you are not able to go in person, I highly recommend you think about finding ways to participate virtually. And so this, I shouldn't have clicked through that fast. And so this webinar being done by Jeff Donahue, who's a former district president and commissioned lay ministry candidate for denominational affairs. And we learned about the commissioned lay ministry program last month. So you can go back and watch that video. if the person who has the 304 number, if you could mute, please. Thank you. But you can go. Jeff Donahue is the former district president for the St. Lawrence district of the UUA. So any questions about the webinar? No. Okay, so I'm going to.
Wait, David, I have a question.
Please.
We got an email with a whole bunch of webinars with different dates, and we've signed up for one on May 31st. Is that the same?
It is not. Those are done by the national office. We're doing one for the region as well. So the national one will be a little more general, we think, than this one will be. So you may want to think about both of them. There are some regional specifics that might be useful to attend, and last year was great that we had a CER mixer gathering. Unfortunately, the Jeopardy game seemed to have a bit too many ins. Yes, and there will be a Central East regional gathering again this coming year. I do not believe we will be playing Jeopardy this year. I will know more about that because the meeting to plan that is Friday. So just to say, but yes, we will have another gathering. We'll find and a way for people to get to know each other. Thank you, Patrina. So just did I answer your question, Linda? You can nod. Thank you. All right. So I also wanted to put forward even if you can't go to New Orleans or you're not going to New Orleans, you could think about hosting a watch party. Now, this could be a watch party at your church, in your sanctuary with a projector and screen or a television, or frankly, it could be a watch party at home in your pajamas by yourself. Some way that a lot of the elements, even if you're not serving as an online delegate, which is something you could do, and I've done that. It was wonderful fun to be able to vote from home at General Assembly. I just love doing that. And also I learned more about the UUA by being an online delegate than I ever did by being there, because there are so many things that distract you when you're there. But there are many things that are happening that are being live streamed that take no registration, that will be able, that you can see. And here's a schedule. And once again, we'll send this out, the whole webinar out to the list with these dates after the call. But all of these events are going to be live streamed without the need for registration. So including the Service of Living Tradition, the WARE lecture, the presidential candidates forum. So just to say, once again, we'll send this out, but all of these things, there are ways for you to participate in General Assembly even if you're unable to be there.
Hey, David, yeah. I heard a rumor, I don't know if you can confirm this or not, that the winner of our presidential election will be announced after the WARE lecture.
I don't confirm or deny, but I think that that's possible.
So that might be a really fun, really fun event, Saturday night event at church. Have a potluck, watch the WARE lecture, and wait for the exciting results.
Wait for the returns. Who is the WARE lecturer this year, Pat?
I think it's Brian McLaren.
I think so too. Yeah. So if you don't know, the WARE lecture is one of the major events of General Assembly where we invite someone from outside of Unitarian Universalism to come speak to us. So just Ibu Patel has been a WARE lecturer. Martin Luther King Jr. was a WARE lecturer, among many others. So
I think I mixed up my Brians. I think it's actually Brian Stevenson.
Brian Stevenson, and who is and she's holding up the book. Of course she is. So just know that the WARE lecture is a wonderful church event, and there are some congregations. I'm not saying to do this because I don't want to get blamed if it goes badly, but some congregations choose to live stream the Sunday morning worship of General Assembly instead of having Sunday morning worship themselves. That may be too early to plan or too late to plan for this year, but know that that's something that some congregations do. Any questions about my idea of hosting some form of a General Assembly watch party? Somebody had a chat. If you want to, Patrina brings up, if you want to get jazzed about GA, you could go onto YouTube and watch Nancy McDonald's Sunday service, and from last year's Sunday morning. You are right. It was a great sermon by Central East Region's own, the Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd. So thank you. So I'm going to hit. And the last ad I'm going to do is one, and this is is for the UU Leadership Institute. Just to say, this is a good time to be thinking about leadership development plans for next year, and the institute is always available. uuinstitute.org, and it has a flipped classroom model where you can take classes in so many different things. It's everything from healthy leadership to healthy communication to I don't know what next year's curriculum is going to be, but just everybody. Is there anyone here who doesn't know about uuinstitute.org? I didn't think so, because we talk about each month. I'm just reminding you to go take a look. The fall classes, I think, are up. If they're not, they will be really soon. All right, with that, I'm willing to turn the floor over to Beth Casebolt to share with us on social media and communications in congregations. Beth, the floor is yours. You tell me when to change slides.
I will. Okay. Well, you can change to the first slide right now. So tonight, I want to focus on two specific topics: why an online presence with social media and an up-to-date website is essential if you want to attract visitors, and what you need to consider about communications in your congregation to be effective. So policy-related things. So why should you have an up-to-date website and social media presence? Why mess with Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever the last greatest thing is? Your members aren't looking those places, so what's the point? So in answer to your question, I would ask a different question. David, go ahead. Do you want to gain new members or even attract more visitors? Get one more. Then you need to be online. If the answer to that question is yes, you need to be online. If the answer to that question is no, you don't need to worry about your online presence. Can you do the next one, please? So the 30 and under set, that's millennials and younger, use social media as one of their primary forms of communication. Primary forms of communication. They don't use email nearly as much. They don't use phones. They use a lot of texting and social media. And they grew up in an age where if you want to know something, you Google it. And if the answer isn't on the internet, you move on to something else. That might seem short-sighted to those of us who didn't grow up in that era, but the reality is that's today's reality. And since that age group makes up 50% of the world's population, it is definitely one we need to pay attention to. Next slide. So what does that mean to you? It means you need to have all the information a visitor might want to know on an attractive and easy to navigate website. An FAQ page is a good place to start. And you need to link those pages to your Facebook, Twitter, and other social media accounts so folks can find it. But how do you know what a visitor wants to know? Well, one way is to ask folks on your Facebook and Twitter and other social media accounts. Put a question out there saying, hey, we're working on a frequently asked questions page. What questions do you have? How can you help us out? And another is to have a form or a link on your frequently asked question page on your website for people to submit questions. Can't find the answer here? Ask your question now. Those who submit questions and provide an email should get a prompt reply back. Those who ask questions on Facebook and Twitter should also get prompt replies back. Next slide. Which also means you need to get them engaged in the congregation more quickly. I'm sorry, I just skipped a paragraph. The statistics also tell us that 90% of all of our visitors have already researched this online before they come in our front door. Some have been participating in our congregational life virtually for as long as a year or more, through reading blog posts, watching videos of services, listening to sermons, reading and commenting on Facebook posts, and more. So the easier it is for them to tell if they will fit in our congregations through these methods, the sooner they will appear in real life. Which also means it's really important that your social media accurately represent your congregation. I've talked about this a number of times before in webinars I've done, where if you put on your website and your social media all sorts of pictures that imply you're a very diverse congregation and you're not, because that's what you aspire to, you're not accurately representing your congregation. And that's giving people a false idea of what to expect. It also means, because these people know your congregation, they want to be involved as soon as they show up in your front door. If they've been participating for a year for virtually, they feel like they know you and they're ready to jump into things. They're not going to take the same path that the typical visitor who wandered in off the street and knows nothing about the congregation in terms of becoming integrated into the congregation. It's not going to take them several visiting times to even want to talk to anybody about what other opportunities there are than Sunday morning. These folks want to get involved. So that's going to require an adaptation to your hospitality and visitor programs. You need to be prepared for that. However, one other thing I want to talk about is that social media accounts need to have activity to not look like they're for groups no longer in existence. So the other side of this equation is educating your congregants to share and participate. Go ahead, David. So let's take Facebook, for example. Okay, go to the next one. You need to ask your congregants to visit your page periodically, once a week if they can, and share posts that they find there that they find interesting. Then these posts will show up on their friends' news feeds, and if they share them, you get the whole idea. Ask them to like or comment on posts, which also makes them look more interactive. You want to make sure that anything you post on your page is public so anyone can see it and or share it, and you should ask your congregants to make their shares public if they can. Some folks have some very specific reasons why they can't, but that's an option. Another area this drives me crazy, but is this one of those things we really need to pay attention to? So there's an event function on Facebook, and lots of people put their events on Facebook, and hey, there's this event. And one of the problems with events on Facebook is it tells you how many people have said on Facebook that they're attending. So if you're using another form of registration, such as Eventbrite, folks are likely to click they're coming to the event on Facebook because they're RSVPing elsewhere. And so you might say, well, why is that important? Well, if I'm a visitor checking out your page and I see this event that looks really cool and I click on it, and according to there's only 3 people attending, I'm going to think, well, this is going to be kind of lame, and I'm not going to want to go to this. No one's going to be there. In reality, there might be 40 people attending, but they all registered on Eventbrite or however you ran your registration or called the church office, and they didn't bother to say on Facebook, hey, I'm attending. So you need to educate your folks to do that. You need to get them to click that attending button, even if they register elsewhere. Now, are you not sure what social media platform to use? Go ahead, David. Then poll your congregation to find out what your members are using. This is a good place to start. I recommend Facebook and Twitter as starting points. As far as content suggestions and other do's and don'ts, including policy recommendations, please check out my webinar recording from this past March on the CER YouTube channel. I went through all of that information in great detail in like an hour and a half, so it's really a lot more than I can do right here. Now, the other area I get a lot of questions about from congregations is congregational communications, your internal communications. I'll go to the next one. Most of us have moved away from the old phone tree as our primary form of communication with our congregants, but with so many options out there, what is the best thing to use? Well, the first thing is, I hate to break it to you, but there is no one way to communicate with all your members anymore. With generational differences and individual preferences, you are never going to find that magic bullet that will communicate with everyone at one time. So you're going to have a multi-pronged plan. This is another area where I would poll your congregation. So who uses Facebook? Who's on email? Who checks Twitter? And I would create a communications plan that uses all the platforms you have to communicate important messages. For example, you could create an email and then post the same information to Facebook, and if you have cross-posting set up, it would post to Twitter for you. If you use an email service like MailChimp, it will actually post to Facebook and Twitter for you, which is, side note, a really great way to share your newsletter. For urgent messages, such as church being canceled due to weather, some congregations have turned to mass texting services that folks can sign up for and receive a text message. And while that does work for a lot of folks, you do need to remember that not everyone will sign up. Not everyone does have a cell phone that can receive text messages, either because of the phone or because of their calling plan, nor is it something you probably want to use on a weekly basis or something like that, because it does have a price tag attached to it. So it should probably be for the most important and urgent messages. Email lists are something every congregation struggles with. Should they be announcement only? Should they allow discussion by all members? How to keep the discussions on topic? Should we have more than one? Moderators of your list are important if it's an open discussion to keep things civil and on topic. You need to have a rules of engagement for your lists, which should be posted frequently. And that should also be part of your communications policy. And those same rules are important for social media platforms in terms of what you will block or remove when people post comments. So you'll want it also posted to your social media platforms. Okay, next slide. There is no one way that works for everyone. I can't tell you this is the way to go. What I can tell you is you need a communications policy that covers the purpose of these different methods and how you want to engage with them. So much of what I talked about tonight I covered in detail in the March webinar I referenced a few minutes ago, which is on the CER-UUA YouTube channel, which you can find at this address. And I'm happy to talk with any congregation who's struggling with issues around communications and social media. So that's basically everything in a nutshell that I was going to cover tonight. So I'm open to questions at this time.
So feel free to either type your questions in the chat box or to say them aloud. And Beth, thank you. And then we can go from there. And I want to highlight, Beth really is wonderfully responsive when congregations have a question about communications, that they come to the primary contact with it. And if we can't answer it or we think that there's a better answer than we can give, we'll just loop Beth in. And Beth is really, really great at doing that. And Beth is also a primary contact for our congregations in West Virginia. I don't think we said that before. So what questions may there be?
I have a question.
Please, if you could say your name and where you're from.
I'm Jenny Bridges. I'm from Davies Memorial Unitarian Universalist Church in Camp Springs, Maryland.
Thank you, Jenny.
And yes, we're a small congregation, and we have difficulty finding people with the combination of technical expertise and time to work on these, on this communication. So it's true what you said. Most people that come say that they have found us online, through Facebook or just by doing a Google search. But you have resources for training people that might be willing to do this but don't have the time to do it? Or but that haven't
Don't have the
that
skills.
Could do it half the time but aren't trained.
I actually did on the old on-demand learning center. I did a social media 101 workshop that went through how to do Facebook, how to do Twitter. A lot of that, some of that information is outdated because these are fast-moving platforms. They don't stay the same, and the rules change on a fairly regular basis. But some of that information is still relevant, and that site is still currently live. It's going away probably over the summer as we migrate information to the UUA website. But I can provide you with some of those links. I also, in terms of the website kind of side of things, the UUA has created a WordPress template for websites, which that would require probably a little bit of work and some technical expertise to get it set up, but WordPress is incredibly easy to keep up to date and doesn't require a lot of technical skill. So that would be, and they have a very well written guidelines and suggestions and how to do it systems. So I would definitely recommend those two. If you have individuals who are looking for, I'm happy to do a workshop, a webinar, an online thing on here's the basics of Facebook or here's the basics of Twitter, if there's enough interest. So, if you've got a couple people and we can put out a call and see if there's enough folks around the region, I'm sure we could probably come up with folks who would be interested in that. I just need to know if folks want that.
Yes,
Thank you, Beth. Jenny, did that get your question?
Yes, that's helpful. Just try to follow up and get more specific information. Yes.
And we can send it out over the CER President's List as part of the follow-up to this teleconference.
yes.
Okay.
So who else might have a question? I think Linda Sanders may.
Yes. Yeah, mine is similar. This is Linda Sanders from Wilmington, Delaware. It would be extremely helpful to get some sort of guidance or training about being the administrator for a social media platform, like for Facebook and Twitter, some of the kind of do's and don'ts, and some sort of basic training so that we could get people who have time, but not necessarily all the skills to help more with this.
Well, like I said, I'm happy to set that up. I'll set that up for the fall then. If there's, we'll put out a call and see how that goes. The other thing I would say is that the UUA on their website in their communication section has actually a do's and don'ts page for Facebook and recommendations for Twitter. So I would, if in the meantime, until we get that put together, I would definitely check out their site. And I'll put the URL for that. Actually, it's already there. The uua.org/communications without the websites piece that Pat already put in there is where you can find that. But I'll send that link out through the email list. But yeah, we'll put together we'll do a Facebook 101 and a Twitter 101 probably in the fall, early fall.
Thank you. And maybe, and who else might have a question? Well, if there's not, you can still add them to the chat, and Beth can see the chat, and we be able to respond in the chat. We'll give it just another moment to see if there's any more specific questions for Beth, and if not, then we will move on to Patricia Infante and Healthy Disclosure. So Pat, this is your 1-minute warning. Or maybe less than a minute. All right, thank you all very much. And Beth, thank you very much for your for being with us today. And like I said, if a question comes up, feel free to ask it in the chat. And so with that, I'm going to screen share again and bring back up our slides. And bring up Healthy Disclosure. So Pat, take it away.
Hey, thank you, David. So this is a question that congregations often struggle around. What kind of information do we share? When do we share it? Who do we share it with? What's private? What's confidential? So we're gonna just do a very sort of a superficial look at that. I have posted a link to a wonderful book called Healthy Disclosure that you can go ahead. That's good, David. That you may want to have on your bookshelf if you don't already. It's a great resource because there are many great areas with this topic, and so it's the kind of thing where it's just a great reference to have on hand for your leadership. So as as I think Beth suggested, we're all on information overload. There are so many different places that information is coming at us, and there are many different places where we are disseminating information, and we can lose track of that. Next slide. Congregations in particular are places where we just have lots of leaky pipes in congregations. Information just seems to migrate. Part of it is this idea that, well, we're all in this together, and so if I have information, we're all owners of this congregation in a sense, and so it's okay for me to share. There are also times when we're, congregations sometimes are places where we have a real sense of intimacy with others, and we feel that, well, it's okay to share because, you know, we have this really good and positive and healthy relationship. So it's okay for me to tell you this information. Next slide. So, so much of what we say in our everyday conversation, we're not even thinking about it. It just slips out of our mouth. You know, the average person talks 150 to 200 words a minute. And when you're in a webinar like this, we're probably talking even faster. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that we're not even really tracking what we're saying. A lot of times when we go into congregations, we find that the conflicts or the challenges that congregations are having are related to how they're managing information. And in our congregations, knowledge is often power. We know that certain information, leaders are, you know, only the leaders are privy to that information, or only the ministers privy to that information. So information becomes this kind of currency in congregations. Next slide. So just going to identify, and again, this comes from the book Healthy Disclosure that I highly recommend. The authors have identified 5 different levels of information that we will encounter in our congregational lives. One is, of course, public, and we just had great examples of that. Your website is public. Your Facebook page is public. All that earned media, when you get a great article in the newspaper about things that you're doing, that's all public information. Open information is kind of the next level down. It's a little bit smaller group. That's typically the information that's available to anybody who is a member of the congregation, perhaps a regular attender. That might be information that's shared in a newsletter. It might be information that's just kind of generally known, things up on the bulletin board, announcements at our Sunday service, joys and concerns that are shared at our weekly service. So that's information that is out there in the open, but it's pretty much contained in the community. The next level is limited access information. So that kind of information might be as simple as your member directory. Most congregations don't put their membership directory with names and addresses and phone numbers up on their website. That information is controlled. We have policies, or we have ideas about who that information should be shared with, and we don't share it beyond that. It could also, limited access could also be information that the board has access to. Things like you know, some of the financial information that maybe goes into the budgeting process might be something that the board discusses. Information around employment transitions, the board might be discussing those kinds of things. Confidential, again, we're getting into a smaller and smaller group of who has access to this information. So confidential information is that information that is shared only with the owner of the information and one other person, maybe 2 other people. Once you get beyond 2 or 3 people, you don't call it confidential anymore, you really call it limited access. And then finally, the private information is the information that is mine. I own that information. That might be information that's legally private information, things like my social security number, things like my medical information, any kind of information about my sexuality, information about my prior work history, any results of a background information. That would be confidential. So if you do a background screening for your volunteers, that's usually confidential. That's not private, because that's information that more than one person has access to. Next slide. So this is just some verbiage that kind of helps to explain that previous chart. And you're going to get this, so I'm not going to go over this right now. We'll go on to the next slide. So this one comes out of the book, and again, who has a right to know? So in a congregation, or there's a term, a legal term, that's called right to know. And so who has a right to know information? Well, if it's public information, everybody has access. Everybody has a right to know that information. And again, the pyramid of who has a right to know kind of gets smaller and smaller as that universe of folks who have access to that information or who own that information gets smaller. So there's a correlation there between who has a right to know in our congregations. Next slide. Well, we're going to skip this one. We'll skip that one. So beyond right to know, there's also this idea of a need to know. So just because somebody has a right to know, so the congregation might have a right to know lots of things, but do they need that information? Is that information that is germane to the work that they're doing? If you are on a committee, for example, if you're on a search committee, there are things that you have a right to know, but there are things that you might not need to know in order to do the work, to do the task that you've been asked to do. We're going to go on. One of the things that congregations struggle with is the idea of what's private and what's secret. And secrecy generally has a slightly more negative connotation than privacy. Privacy kind of speaks more to our inner lives and the information that we hold dear and we hold close and that we own as individuals. Secrecy is often information that we keep from others because we're driven by shame, embarrassment, maybe fear, and things. We're going to talk about some of the things that might be places where secret keeping happens in congregations. We might not share things because we might think they're harmful to the congregation. There might be something in our history that we don't feel a need to share because it might be harmful to the current health of the congregation. There might be things like some financial information that we might not want to share because we think it might create anxiety in the congregation. But oftentimes secrets can be damaging to a congregation in the longer term, in the longer run. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. That one is in a different order in my thing. Go to the next one. Is there a secret slide? Hey, there it goes. Okay. So example of secrets that sometimes are held in congregations are secrets about money, who's giving, who the big donors are, how much the staff is being paid, just all kinds of different issues around money. And oftentimes we don't want to share those things because maybe we're not sure that we own the information. We might not want to out people who are not donating or people who are larger donors. So there are times when we keep a lot of secrets about money. Typical congregational secrets also can be around bad decisions. So a board might have made a decision about, chosen the wrong contractor for taking trees down on the property and spent more money than they should have. And so feelings of shame or embarrassment can overcome us, and we say, you know what, we're not gonna talk about that. We're just not gonna share that information. There might be misconduct in our history that there is shame around, or there's fear around exposing people who might have been part of that story, and so sometimes we want to hold those things in secret. But most of the time, and if you have an opportunity to get this book and really study some of what these authors have to say. Secrets are actually not healthy for congregations. Not that we want to share private information or confidential information, but secret keeping is not, in the long run, always healthy for our congregation. Next slide. So there are some kinds of disclosures that can be a little problematic. And I'm sure we've all experienced this in our congregations. Rumors, hey, I heard that such and such, so-and-so happened. Or there can be gossip. And both of those things are often, they start out somewhat innocent or somewhat well-intentioned, but they can often be based on information that's not true, or information that is ambiguous, and maybe information that is not quite ready to be shared. So something that's just a little underdone and not quite ready to be shared more broadly. And it circumvents the formal communication path in the congregation. So if we have a way of sharing information, if we have determined, who gets to share information, when that information gets shared, how it gets shared, rumors and gossip can circumvent that, and that can be harmful to people. Things can be revealed before it is appropriate. Things like staff departures, new staff hires, things like that. If we share secrets about those, or if we share rumor or gossip about those things, people may hear things that they thought that they should know, or that they thought that nobody knew. Next slide. So the most important thing really with this is not so much to know the information that I have just whipped through in the previous 8 or 9 slides, but to know kind of what do we do? How do we determine what information can be disclosed, what information can be shared, what information needs to be held confidential, that kind of thing. So the recommendation is that you enter into a process of assessing. So what's happening? What's the situation? Is it a transition? Is it a staff person has done something, some financial malfeasance? Is it something more serious, something that might require some, that involves legal kind of determination? So the first thing to do, figure out what's happening, who knows what, who already has the pieces of the puzzle, how to gather up the pieces, identify all of the facts that you have. Where did this information come from in the first place? Who owns the information? Is this confidential information? If that's confidential, that needs to be taken into consideration. Does it need to be moved out into the realm of limited access? Do more people need to know more of the facts and more of the details in order to make a determination about how much more, how it gets disclosed? Who has the right to know, and who has a need to know? What's missing? Is there a part of the story that we don't know? Who has that information? How can we determine that information? Is there a risk of immediate harm to any one person? If there is, we would act accordingly. Are there laws that apply to this? Is this a situation where there's, for example, in the realm of child abuse, we have requirements to report, and many of our church staff and certainly our clergy are mandatory reporters in most of the states in the Central East region. So we would gather as much information as we can, and if you have a safe congregations team, that might be one group that gathers this information. It might be your board. that gathers this information. It might happen initially within a staff group if it's if it begins with a pastoral program. So there are different places where this process might be initiated, but the basic process would be the same. So then you would sort of ask yourself, and the group that is gathered would ask some questions. What is to be gained by sharing or not sharing? Who should be telling the story? Who owns this narrative? Who needs to know? I know with congregations, one of the questions I get very often is around limited access agreements. If you have somebody in your congregation who is perhaps has some kind of a previous offense, and we want to create a limited access agreement, who needs to know? Do we need to tell everybody in the congregation? Do we need to send it out to just the RE parents? Who needs to know? So there's a set of questions that you would ask yourself. From there, that would determine the action that you would need to take. And then, look back and evaluate the process. Did we make the best decision that we could make? Did we make an appropriate level of disclosure? Next slide. The last slide. Okay. Hey, so this is again, there's a lot of gray in this topic, and I've whipped through. So if you have something come up and you don't know what to do, the first thing to do is to call your primary contact. And I hope everybody in Central East knows who your primary contact is. If you don't, it's on our website. You may need to contact your insurance carrier if it involves something that there might be some kind of risk management piece to, or there might be some liability for the congregation. You might want to talk to your insurance carrier. A lot of people are afraid to call their insurance agent, but I know that we work a lot with Church Mutual. You do not have to call, you do not have to make a claim to call and talk about a situation. So they are really a tremendous resource. You might need to call a lawyer. You might, in some situations, you might need to call law enforcement. You might find that you've had some kind of embezzlement of funds, and you know that you know that needs to go to into a legal process. And everybody should know who their mandated reporters are if there were a need to report any kind of abuse in the congregation. So that's the last slide. I've spoken quickly, so you may have questions.
And I will stop share for a few minutes and see. Thank you, Pat, and for being able to share that quickly with us as we're trying this model of doing 2 in 1. This is a conversation that we have congregations talk to us regularly with questions. And I want to second that piece about calling your primary contact. It's if you're in doubt about sharing something or how much to share or what to share, this is one of the things that we would love to have your primary contact be involved sooner rather than later.
Yes.
If the thing I would say here is that we're probably going to be involved in the conversation. The question is just at what point. And it's better to have us involved in helping you think through this process early. In the sense that we're much more familiar with running through this train of asking these questions than you necessarily would be. So with that, what questions might you all have for Patricia?
I've either wowed them or put them to sleep. It's also the kind of information that sometimes we don't realize, we don't sort of keep it in our heads until we need it, until that moment comes when we need it. So it's good to just know where to look and who to contact if you need support.
And I will, I hadn't talked to Patricia about this before, but I have a version of this that was broken out by my predecessor, Richard Speck, from the same book that does a step-by-step process that you can walk through. And I may add that with your permission to the email when we send this out. This is kind of to remind you step-by-step what questions to ask. So anyone else have any questions or thoughts?
So Beth wanted to mention something about the Sunshine Law.
Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, so I just full disclosure, I come from a family that's a journalism family that actually owns a newspaper. I'm very familiar with the sunshine laws in a lot of states that require that public entities not make decisions, governmental entities not make decisions in a vacuum. They have to do it in a public meeting. And I've had congregations tell me, the Sunshine Law requires that we make everything in public, that board, all this. That's actually not true for nonprofits. You are not a governmental agency or public organization. Therefore, the Sunshine Law does not apply to you. Now, should you be open in your decisions? Probably. But certain things like personnel decisions and such like that do not need to be out in the open, and probably shouldn't. And the Sunshine Law does not apply to you. So I just wanted to clarify that because there's often confusion around that.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, I will say thank you.
I have a comment.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, if you tell us what your name is and where you're from.
I'm sorry, Jenny Bridges from Camp Springs, Maryland.
Hello, Jenny.
Hello again. We had a couple of instances where it was important to share process with the congregation, not necessarily details. So we had a search committee a couple of years ago who took secrecy to such an extent that they wouldn't even tell us where they were in their process of searching. And it created a lot of hard feelings, and they were just so secret. And this year we've been in negotiations with another congregation, and I've been on a regular basis updating people about where we are in the process. These 3 people went to meet at the other church. The other church came to visit us. Oh, we're still talking about it. Oh, their board is going to consider it. Our board is considering it. So that kind of process detail we kept on sharing so that people would have some clue about what was going on, even though we didn't share specific details.
Yeah, that's great. Transparency where it is appropriate is a great way to keep people from feeling out of the loop, to make them feel included, to give them a sense of ownership over the decisions. So for congregations, particularly if you have a really big decision ahead of you, the more transparent you can be and the more information you can share throughout the process, the better people will feel about it.
So thank you, Jenny. And any other questions or things you wish to share? Which we're going to share a lot about communications in just a few minutes, so there's plenty of room for sharing coming up.
This is Katie Alberti from Mount Kisco. We ran into an issue this year. Got excellent support from you, David, and everybody else in the district. Shared the information that we were worried about sharing with our congregation, and there was a great deal of trust. And everybody felt good about the direction we were. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Katie. And I was honored that and it was more than just it was a large portion of our regional team, walked with you all this year. And that's one of the things that I've noticed. And Pat, if I can just add this piece, it's that you do this well a couple times, and people in the congregation begin to trust your leadership. And in a sense that there's that showing that you will share what can be shared then buys the space later when maybe you can't share as much. It's the congregations who get trapped into not being able to share appropriately that then run into problems of leadership credibility later on during a difficult time. So it's important to think through these issues even when it may not seem as important or as critical, to buy the space for when the space and the grace for when it is. Thank you.
And thank you, guys.
Any other questions for Patricia? Well, thank you all very much. I'm going to share screen for just a second. I also want, before we go further, I want to just name that our regional lead, the Reverend Megan Foley, has joined us. Megan, would you like to say hi and any introductory things you can? Other people introduce themselves. So,
hi all. I'm Megan Foley. Am I freezing? Oh my gosh! No, I'm back. I'm your regional lead for the Central East region. Good to see many of you again. I feel like we have a following now on these calls, which is nice to see, like fan girls and boys. But I'm mostly here just to spy and answer any questions if you have any. So I will go back into my background. Although I'm super enjoying seeing this baby of Beth Casebolt. So her grandbaby is here on the screen with us. So everybody check her out.
Just so you know, the whole team has been living with pictures, and so this is kind of our first time to see the baby in motion. It is glorious. We should have the baby with us for any Zoom call from now on. Okay. So new rule. So I'm just gonna share screen for just a second to remind us of the question that we're planning on having, and this is the rest of our time together. So these meetings go no longer than 90 minutes, so we have about another 25 minutes or so, and if we need to use less, we can. But I just wanted to give a space for us to talk to each other about, in your congregations, how does your congregation communicate with each other in the world? What is something really cool that you do that might be useful for other congregations to know about? What is a challenge that you all have that maybe you want to see if other congregations share? We won't be doing a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. We won't be looking to fix other people's problems. We just want to hear what's communication like in our congregations. So I'm going to stop the screen share and just bring us all back together and open up the floor. Just remember to say what your name is and what congregation you're with.
This is Katie Alberti from Mount Kisco again. We've, I guess a couple of years ago, we switched from a paper newsletter that came out once a month to a MailChimp that comes out every week. We dropped the email listserv that we had and used MailChimp. And I think it works well, but every platform has its challenges. The challenge is that some people don't open their emails, some people don't read their the newsletter. So, you know, you've traded one challenge for another one. And the secret, I guess, but we just have to keep trying to communicate as many ways as possible. We had a congregational meeting, not an annual meeting, but a conversation a couple months ago, and it worked really well to put it in the newsletter, to put it on our Facebook page as an invite, and just try to work it every possible way. We're learning, but it certainly is easier.
Thank you, Katie. And that kind of affirms, you know, the piece that Beth had raised earlier about the different modalities, the lots of different ways of needing to communicate and how people communicate in different ways. There's the apocryphal story in congregations of somebody says, well, why didn't I know about this? And you said, well, did you read your email? Well, no, but why did I know about it? Did you read the newsletter? No, but why did I know about it? Were you in church early enough to hear the announcements? I mean, you know, it is a fact of our existence that we have to communicate and communicate and communicate, because people will often miss 2 or 3 or 4 different modalities of communication. So, thank you. Who else has got something they'd like to share?
David, it's George Banziger from Marietta, Ohio. Can you hear me?
Hello, we can hear you. We can hear you fine, George. Although it looks like you may have Scotch tape over your camera.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
2 points about communicating outside the congregation with the newspaper. When we put in our solar panels earlier this fiscal year, it was a big event for us, and we want to make sure the newspaper got it right. And there's technology involved in explaining the whole process and the system. So we wrote up a press release ourselves with the 1-page press release with all the information and whom to contact for follow-up. And the reporter was able to use all that information and then do some interviews and get some photographs. So we felt more in control by having created a press release saying exactly what we wanted. Second point is our local newspaper has a section on its weekend edition called Focus on Faith, which has been dominated by evangelicals and really kind of exclusive theological persuasions. So we've gained a presence there talking about interfaith dialogue and a more inclusive kind of language about theology. So that's helped get the word out about us.
Right. Thank you, George. I just want to say that I read that article about the Ural solar panels, and I that was one of the best articles I'd ever seen on a UU congregation solar panels. And I'm just I should have guessed that you all had done a press release.
Well, the other thing we did was after the article appeared, I called the editor to congratulate her and the reporter. And editors don't often get that kind of message. So they were very gratified to get that. So it's important to keep a good relationship with the newspaper, even though we don't agree with their editorial policy often.
Well, and I want to draw out, and Beth, you may join me. I want to draw out two things from that, that I learned from my time in Ventura, California, is that, reporters, if you give them 90% of their article done in a press release, they're far more likely to go to press with it. And press releases are not that hard for congregations to write. They're a page, but if you do a good portion of the work for them, it's more likely to become a story. And second, if they think you like them, they're more likely to like you. Right. So it's, the being that piece about calling and saying afterwards, thank you for the article. I just want to celebrate that. So thank you for sharing those things. That's powerful. Anyone else likes to have something they'd like to share?
Well, this is Linda Sanders in Wilmington again.
Hello, Linda.
We have the typical weekly news blast that goes out on email for our announcements and services. We have also e-blast for special announcements of things that are happening that go out about once as needed, but typically about once a month we have something we need to share. And then we have our Facebook and Twitter presences. So one of our challenges are our few members that still need to have snail mail sent to them because they don't use any electronic media.
Right.
And that's a real difficulty.
Well, thank you. Since you're one of my congregations and I live like 20 minutes from you, I want to add a couple of things, that I'm going to brag on you all a little bit. One of the things that you all have done, and you may not even be aware of it, is talk to all of the congregations in the Delmarva Peninsula to share your newsletters with each other, and to have someone in each congregation who reads the newsletters of the other congregations and then cross-pollinates in the newsletters for events and programs and things. And so, so an event may be happening at First U Wilmington, but with enough time, it shows up in Newark's newsletter as well, because they're cross-pollinating their newsletters and their congregational weekly updates and the things. And that also inspired by you all, you've been having a conversation, the cluster has, about maybe creating an even more proactive way of using some electronic resources to be able to even cross-pollinate your websites with events and things like that. So I just amen, hallelujah, and you all are being fairly innovative, at least in thinking about how to share things among the congregations of the Delmarva Peninsula.
Yes, that's a good point. We really do attend each other's events too, so it's great.
You really do. So I just wanted to, and that's the piece I want to say here. That doesn't happen by chance. There's a lot of work that those congregations are doing to share amongst each other the events that are happening. So thank you, Linda. Who else would like to share something that's happening, how you communicate well, a challenge you may be having?
This is Jenny Bridges again from Camp Springs, Maryland. We have the same issue with some people who need to receive written things by mail. And we have a newsletter that comes out monthly, and that's mailed to those people. But we have what we call e-minders instead of e-blasts that come out weekly. And we contacted those people that need things by mail and ask them to arrange a buddy so that each of those, it's just 3 or 4 people, but they have a buddy to alert them to things that come out in the middle of the week that there isn't time to mail them, or resources to actually to want to keep mailing all these little pieces of things. And that seems to have helped.
Well, that's a pretty cool idea in lots of ways. Not just something that maybe happened in the middle of the week, but thinking for people who might have some ability challenges that for whom they might not know. Thinking through having someone who is their buddy to help them. And frankly, I know I'm always more likely to attend a congregational event if I've got a buddy who tells me they're going. So there's some cool ideas there. Thank you, Jenny. I love that idea of the buddy. Who else has something else they might like to share? If y'all can't tell, this is my favorite part of the meeting, so come on. I love all of the meeting, but well, anything else? Because we'll give it another 30 seconds, 15 seconds or so to see if anybody else has anything they wish to share. Well, if not,
This is Linda. I'll ask one question.
Yes, please go ahead, Linda.
Is that we use constant contact for our e-blast, and we find we have problems with AOL users with that. Do other people have problems with people on AOL?
I'm going to bring up Beth.
So AOL is notorious for not working with a lot of the e-companies. MailChimp has the same problem, vertical response, constant contact. What each of those companies do is they try to create a contact with the major programs. AOL is just behind the times. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Their spam filters filter out things they shouldn't be. And what you need to tell folks who have AOL is to potentially ask them to whitelist that address, the your address, and whitelist constant contact, and for them to contact AOL and say, hey, I'm trying to get this stuff. I signed up for this. You're blocking me at the server level. That's really the only way to do it. If they don't tell you they're not getting it, it's hard for us to do anything. But that's a known problem in the industry.
Thanks.
And to compound that, a lot of Verizon users are about to be switched over to AOL. So you may have more of those coming up.
So thank you. Any other questions or anything anybody wishes to share?
I don't know, in Glens Falls, we have a monthly board congregation conversation that sort of enables the congregation to talk to the board and the board to talk to the congregation. And we do this every month, the second Sunday after the coffee hour.
So this is Bob Rockwell in Glens Falls, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Bob. So you do this on Sunday. You have a specific time for congregation members to speak with members of the board.
Well, it's where we go to the sanctuary, and we're a small congregation, and we get maybe 20 or 30 people after the coffee hours. We finish at 11, and maybe about 11:30, we'll gather in the sanctuary, and the board members we sort of sit in a circle with the board members and the congregation, and we have interaction and talk about what's going on and answer any questions and talk about events and important board issues that have come up.
So when you say you're a small congregation, how many members do you have?
I think about 60 or 70.
So you're getting basically a third to half of the congregation to come to that meeting.
Yes.
I'm just going to say that's amazing. That's brilliant.
I don't know. It's it's a lot of fun.
I will say that I've now heard that something that many congregations would call that a town hall, a board town hall.
Yeah.
Board town halls that are fun. I may have to come up and see how you do that.
You're quite welcome anytime.
There we go. That may be a research trip, Megan, because that'd be something to learn. So great. Thank you. Anyone else have something they wish to share about how your congregation communicates?
Well, this is Linda again. I'll say we do something similar. We call them board chats. whenever there's been a significant vote or some issue that we're dealing with in the board, that we want some input from the congregation, we publicize a board chat and what the topic's going to be. And we probably get about 40 or at least 40 or 50 people coming to those. So they've been a pretty successful way to communicate.
And I've been there for a couple of those, you know, and been part of them. So yeah, they have been very successful. Well, we'll give it one last call to see if there's anyone else who has anything. This has been really fruitful. I mean, I've learned some things in this little session, some ideas. Anybody have anything else that they wish to share? Evelyn, are you trying to unmute?
Picture.
I just unmuted you.
Oh, okay.
Did you have something you wanted to share?
Just basically, we did the same basic things. I think for internal communications, one of the things that we have done is established a new share so that if somebody has an activity that's going on that they want to publicize, they just send it to one central email address, and it goes to the newsletter, it goes to the email, it goes to our Sunday bulletin, all the communications venues. They don't have to send it to each one individually. They don't have to remember to send it out.
That's an interesting idea. So I'll just tell everybody, this is Evelyn Grimm from Channing Memorial in Ellicott City, Maryland.
Yeah, and I don't know what I did, but I lost my picture somehow, but I can still hear you.
Well, and we can see you.
Oh, okay, good.
Anyway,
well, I think that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Evelyn. So, anyone else?
Oh, we have a board buzz. This is Patrina Hollingsworth from River Road.
Hello, Patrina.
In Maryland, in Bethesda, actually. But we do a board buzz that sort of encapsulates what the actions and the most recent board meetings. And we put it on a bulletin board, which we call the board. And we also do a put in the newsletter so that people, instead of having to go and read the really exciting minutes, they can just see a nice little summary.
So it's kind of just a summary of each of what board actions, and you do that for each board meeting?
Yes.
Right, and it goes out in the newsletter, but it also is posted.
Yes.
See, that's interesting. And, you know, I also say that then you're also doing two things. You're not only communicating, you're also covering yourself. Right. So it was in the board buzz.
And in the minutes. So
and in the minutes, right.
We're doubly accessible.
Thank you. Anyone else have something they wish to share?
I'm just curious. Is anybody tweeting on a regular basis on behalf of their congregation? Anybody got any tweets going on? No, not in this group? Okay. How about Facebook? Facebook groups, Facebook page? Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, and one of the things we've run into Facebook often, and maybe this can be part of something that Beth, we talk about, is the challenge of moderating Facebook. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there is something about being face-to-face with people that makes our communications more responsible oftentimes than when we're typing words to a page. And, you know, there's just a reminder and teaching about that. But there's also that any type of online communication like that needs some level of moderation, and that takes a level of authority. Right? That takes, you know, and people being willing to understand that authority. So, you know, Facebook is an amazing tool, and it also is one of the places where some of the worst congregational behavior occurs. And so it's just a both and.
We had a problem with Facebook also because you can have reviews. So if you have a public Facebook page of your institution, you can have a review, and it could be someone who came in to some event and had a horrible time, and that review is there forever. So.
Which is a challenge with the pages, with the public pages structure. I think there are a couple other structures that sometimes congregations use. Beth, I don't know if you are better with that than I am, but
Well, I mean, there's groups, but groups can't be groups can open up a whole new can of worms. The reality is reviews exist out there in a number of different things. A lot of congregations don't realize that they have reviews posted on Yelp. Mm-hmm. And don't ever check it. And what you need to do is reach out to those people, or and try to address their concerns, or have a private conversation with them. That's the best I can offer.
And we've encouraged our congregants to actually post reviews on Yelp.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. But I've known congregations who had absolutely no idea they were on Yelp. Well, we didn't put ourselves on Yelp. Well, that's not how Yelp works. So, and the next thing they know, they've got a bunch of bad reviews because somebody's going around just bashing UU churches. I mean, that happened in a particular part of the country. And so you do need someone to pay attention to that kind of stuff,
And then just to hold up the piece that was named there, but I want to hold it up. To be very intentional about getting mm-hmm. congregation members to do good reviews of your congregation.
Right.
That's
ahead. Part of that education piece I was talking about in my presentation. Congregations need to educate their congregants to be active participants on their social media. And I'm not saying you have to tell your congregation, all right, everybody here has to go out and get a Facebook page. Or account. What I'm saying is everyone who has Facebook should be participating or trying to participate to the best of their ability. And the congregation needs to make an effort to educate them what that means. How can I help the congregation with its outreach? That's one way to frame it. I really want to help my congregation with outreach, but I can't help with I can't go someplace and do something. I'm not going to stand on a street corner. I'm not going to hand out flyers. Well, here, you're active on social media. Help us that way. Post comments, post reviews, answer questions, do those kinds of things. Be an active participant on our social media. And I think for some people, that's a great way to be involved and be a participant in that outreach that they're not even thinking about.
Yeah, and I'll. As we're moving towards closing time, I'll just see if there's any last minute comments, and if not, I have an idea I wanted to share from a congregation out west, and I was amazed when I saw a congregation do this. They had what they called a review party. And what they did was they got pizza and like ice cream and candy and stuff and popcorn, and they had a little party where everybody brought their laptops and their tablets, and everybody wrote good reviews for the congregation while sitting in the sanctuary, right? And just had a party where everybody got to see each other's reviews and did that together. And all of a sudden on Yelp and Facebook and all these other places, the congregation got a whole bunch of good reviews because they did it intentionally. I've always loved the congregation that did that. I thought it was unique and ingenious. And so with that, last minute, anything else for us to do tonight besides our closing words? I bring you these once again from the hymnal because I love our hymnal. This is number 670. It's titled "The Way." Friend, I have lost the way. The way leads on. Is there another way? The way is one. I must retrace the track. It's lost and gone. Back, I must travel back. None goes there, none. Then I'll make here my place. The road runs on. Stand still and set my face. The road leaps on. Stay here, forever stay. None stays here, none. I cannot find the way. The way leads on. Oh, places I have passed, that journey's done. And what will come at last? The way leads on. Edwin Muir. With that, let the way lead on. Go forth in peace. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. We'll have the video of this up probably tomorrow morning, and we'll send an email out with the video and the slides and a few other materials. Thank you all for seeing you all. Have a beautiful night.
Thank you.